Hello and welcome to our South Africa webinar. My name is Woodrow Arrington. I'm a product manager on the CloudFront team. I'm joined with me by Robert Breckenridge.
I'm an Edge Service Business Development Manager. Thanks, Woodrow.
And today we're going to be talking about Amazon Web Services and some of our Edge services. And within that lineup of Edge products, we're going to speak more specifically about Amazon CloudFront, Shield, and WAF. Now, this webinar is meant to be a high-level introductory overview of what these services offer and how they can benefit your web page or your application. Now, let's talk about what's happening around the world. One of the main reasons why we're hosting this webinar is to draw awareness to two recent announcements where CloudFront launched 2 Edge locations in South Africa. And we launched these Edge locations in Cape Town and one in Johannesburg as well. What this means is that CloudFront is now connected to all the major internet networks within the area. And what this does is it brings many of the benefits of AWS closer to your end viewers within the region. And what we're really excited about these launches is the impact it has on the reduced latency within the country. And so when we talk about why this launch is notable, we look at that latency that has been reduced. Within South Africa, that P50 or average latency has now been reduced from over 200 milliseconds to 50 milliseconds. And that 75% reduction in latency is notable as it shaves off several hundred milliseconds or even seconds of time it takes for the viewer to conduct the TLS handshake to request content and for the origin to provide its response. Now, there are several studies on the internet that talk about the importance of that latency and how crucial it is to reduce it. And that any reduction that you can have in latency will certainly improve the viewer experience, which can ultimately improve the retention of that customer and the opportunity to make a conversion. Now, that can be measured however you might look at that in terms of maybe a sale or some type of sign up. But we all know in general that having a more responsive web page or application can make a big difference in our satisfaction with the experience and our likelihood to return. And so again, that's why we're very excited about the benefits that CloudFront has now provided with the launch of these 2 new Edge locations. Now, in addition to the launches in South Africa, CloudFront has been busy launching more Edge locations around the world. And one of the best things about CloudFront is the extensiveness of the global network and the fact that it is a living and breathing network that continues to grow. In 2017 alone, we added almost 40 Edge locations. And this year, we've added about 25 more, and with more to come throughout the year. And we're happy to announce that other new country launches have also recently occurred, such as Johannesburg and Cape Town, as were mentioned, but also in Copenhagen and Oslo in the Nordics, Perth, and Bangalore as well. Now, each of these new network expansions continue to reduce latency, just like we described for South Africa. For example, in Copenhagen and in Denmark, they each delivered 35% reductions in average latency. And in Perth, earlier this year, the reduction was as much as 50%. We also continue to grow the size and capacity of our existing Edge locations as demand for CloudFront itself continues to grow. For example, just a few weeks ago, we made an announcement of 9 new Edge locations in a single announcement around the world, including locations in the United States, Europe, and Tokyo. And today, that total number of Edge locations that we've been recently launching brings the total number of current CloudFront Edge locations to 134 locations globally. And as I mentioned before, we're not done growing, and we have some very exciting new network expansions coming in the next several months. So keep in tune for those to come as well. Now, if we take a closer look at our network map, I want to draw attention to another type of architecture that we'll also be discussing a little bit later. And that is what we call a regional edge cache, and they're represented by the larger orange dots within the map. We have 11 of these spread around the world, and they have even bigger cache widths than our standard edge location that the client will first interact with. These are effectively a mid-tier cache and a second layer of caching location that sits between your origin and the CloudFront Edge location. Now, what this does, it improves our ability to cache your content closer to your viewers wherever they may be. It increases the overall cache hit ratio, that there's even less workload on your origin, and these also act as another layer of origin shielding. And what that means is it eliminates the need for every CloudFront Edge location to talk directly to your origin, as they'll first go to the regional edge cache first. And again, we'll kind of cover this in a little bit more in depth in some follow-up slides. Now, today we're going to be talking about Edge services more than just CloudFront. Edge Services is a portfolio of products provided by Amazon Web Services. It does include Amazon CloudFront, AWS Lambda Edge, AWS Shield and Shield Advanced, AWS WAF, and Amazon Route 53. Now, we're not going to be covering every one of these services today. As I mentioned, we're going to specifically talk more about the CloudFront, Shield, and WAF offerings and how they work together. But before we dive into those services, let's first start with a simple application architecture where you might have some type of compute, data store, or storage. This is just representative of a simplified architecture for purpose of our conversation today. Now, that compute could be an EC2 instance, some type of container, or even a Lambda function if you're familiar with AWS Lambda. Now, a data store could be a relational database like RDS or a non-relational database like DynamoDB. And this is where you're going to track your user information that might be accessing your application or your website. The third component would be some type of storage, like an Amazon S3 bucket, where you are going to store a lot of your static content, such as images, CSS, or JavaScript. Now, one of the things that you recognize with this architecture is that your viewers are accessing your application resources directly. This means that every viewer request is going to hit your origin and increase the workload that your origin has. It also exposes your origin to direct attacks from some malicious actor within the network. And so the recommended best practice within AWS architecture is to incorporate edge services. What this does, it essentially puts together a protective little network or shield around your origin or your AWS architecture by, again, extending your architecture closer to that viewer and incorporating CloudFront's edge locations and its native integration with Shield and WAF as well. When you put edge services around your core architecture, it really enhances the security of your architecture, the scalability of it as well, and again, the optimized performance for applications and web pages as well. Now, we've already talked a little bit about CloudFront at the very beginning, but I do want to dive a little bit deeper into how it works behind the scenes. Some of the additional things we will talk about include how CloudFront works with your content, the unique things that you can do with Lambda Edge to customize your CloudFront response, and some of the security options you have when you're working with CloudFront. I'll then turn the time over to the next presenter to talk a little bit more about WAF and Shield and the offerings that those two services have, and how they are integrated very tightly with Amazon CloudFront. So we already mentioned how CloudFront can accelerate your content, but sometimes we don't have visibility into just what the breadth of that content that can be accelerated by a CDN is. For a long time, CDNs have always been thought of as only accelerating static content, such as images or JavaScript or style pages. But today's modern CDNs can do so much more. You can do things with video on demand and live streaming events, and CloudFront supports both RTMP and HTTP streaming. You can also do a lot with dynamic content acceleration for non-cacheable content, like API acceleration, for example. And we'll mention an example of that later in the presentation under our case studies as well. And you can do a lot with user inputs, such as put and post, again, reading information into your origins as well. Now, CloudFront is built to be agnostic to the origin that you are using. And what this means is that while we do recommend using S3 or EC2 because of the many benefits that go along with that coupling, you are still free to use your own origin like an on-premise server if that's what you want. Now, CloudFront also allows you to create cache behaviors within your CloudFront distribution. And what this means is that those cache behaviors act as a different mapping or a path pattern to the origins, meaning that you can further customize your distribution by content type or any other variable that you want. Now, talking about that customizability, CloudFront offers you a lot of control over those distributions and the settings. And there's a lot of great documentation and examples on the internet that likely address any question you may have on the setup or optimization of that distribution. Again, today we're going to be speaking more at a high level. So how do the CDN, like CloudFront, work within like an AWS architecture? First and foremost, when a viewer is making a request to your AWS architecture, such as that compute or that storage or that data store, accessing your application is not as straightforward as you would think or as you would hope. It can take many networks to reach that application. And when you realize the path that your viewer request takes, you start to understand that the response from the origin to your viewer may actually differ. And what this means is that every hop from one network to the other can impact your performance, but it can also introduce risk and potentials for malicious actors to come in and intercept that communication. And all of this would result in poorer performance than is possible. Now, with Edge services, we remove many of those inefficiencies, and we're effectively extending the edge of AWS closer to your end viewer. And with CloudFront and Route 53 being closer to your end viewer, it allows us to get your requests onto the AWS network faster, which utilizes an optimized network to go back to your origin, making it more efficient to get the request and supply the response. Now, the tight integration with Shield and WAF also help mitigate risk as well, because those are tightly integrated with CloudFront. Those are also extended further out and closer to your end viewer, again, allowing you to prevent malicious actors from touching your origin. Lambda Edge adds intelligence and control to your content delivery. It's like a pocket knife or multi-tool that allows you to customize your CDN response in ways that were never possible before. And all of this adds to just resulting in an improved performance for your application and thus an improved experience for your end viewer. Now, let's talk a little bit about Lambda Edge. Now, this is a topic that can go very deep, and so we're going to keep it pretty high level. But the idea with Lambda Edge is that it allows you to add unique content delivery functionality to your websites. It means you can personalize your websites and your responses to individual viewers based on variables or header information that comes in. And the way that you do this is that you would identify, like in a first step, some type of data state change or request to an endpoint as the trigger point. The second step is that you would write code around that event. And in the third part, anytime that event occurs, the Lambda function would execute. And in the fourth stage, AWS would automatically scale up those resources in order to execute that code. Now, with CloudFront, you can execute those codes or those Lambda Edge functions at 4 different points. And what that allows you to do is to start to create and modify dynamic content at different points, whether it's on the viewer request or an origin request. It allows you to start to do things for A/B testing, to now start to say, well, if one viewer with a header X makes a request, let's supply a response A. And if they have a different header information, let's supply them with content B. And so there's a lot of great things you can do with Lambda Edge, and we have a great blog channel that talks a lot about these various use cases in greater depth and even provides sample code to get you started. Now, one of the things that we again wanted to emphasize very strongly is that many people think about content delivery networks as a delivery mechanism, and they're completely right. But what we also want to emphasize is that CloudFront is also a security product in and of its own right. That enhancing your security can often come by just adding a CDN in front of your architecture. And that's because we have a lot of security features and capabilities natively built into CloudFront that enable you to meet your strict security requirements that you might have for yourself or within your organization as a whole. And we do this in many ways, such as providing access control, such as restricting access to your origins with origin access identity, or providing signed URLs and cookies for private content. You can also encrypt your data in motion or at rest, and we have many of the most advanced protocols and ciphers to do so. And we're always monitoring the regulatory environment to make sure that we are always in line with the highest of compliance standards. And we are a PCI compliant service as well as a HIPAA compliant. And we also meet compliance standards for many of the ISO standards as well. This is all well documented on our website as well. Now, as mentioned before, we're also seamlessly integrated with many other AWS services like AWS Certificate Manager, Shield, and WAF, and we'll dive into those a little bit later. But suffice to say, those help you automatically manage your SSL certificates and also mitigate DDoS attacks as well. Now, with CloudFront, a lot of this is provided at a great rate from the standpoint of that are published online, and you pay for only the usage that you use. There's no hidden fees, and there's no minimum platform fees as well. CloudFront also offers a free tier where you can get started for 12 months with some free usage, and that's well documented on our free tier page as well. But if you have much higher volume of traffic that you'd like to deliver through CloudFront, there's also the opportunity to receive reserved capacity pricing. And that's really tailored to each individual use case. And there's variable terms of how much that commitment might be, but it does provide reduced pricing from the listed rates that are published online. There's also additional ways that you can optimize your costs, such as what's called a price class, which allows you to determine which regions your content is served out of, so that you can decide, well, maybe you only want to serve out of some of our low-cost regions versus paying for some of the more expensive locations. Now, one of the best cost advantages of using AWS with CloudFront and AWS Certificate Manager is that you have access to a custom SSL certificate for free with Amazon Certificate Manager, and that can be automatically managed and renewed for you with that service. Now, just in short summary, CloudFront again offers a lot of performance and scale benefits to your AWS architecture. There's the network acceleration that we had talked about, the regional edge caching layer that increases your cache hit ratio. We also talked a little bit about the puts and posts, about how you can read information into your origin. But there was another service that we didn't mention called S3 Transfer Acceleration. And what that allows you to do is to read information into your S3 bucket in a very quick manner than going over the general internet itself. We have intelligent controls that allow us to identify what is the edge location that is best for your end viewer so that they always are receiving the fastest experience possible. As I mentioned, there's granular cache control, and we're very fast when it comes to invalidating content around the world. And then there's also the dynamic control of having Lambda Edge offer that serverless compute model at the edge. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hand the time over to our next presenter to talk a little bit more about AWS Shield and WAF.
Thanks. Again, my name is Rob Breckenridge. I'm a AWS Edge Services Business Development Manager, and here to talk a little bit about our perimeter protection services, specifically AWS WAF, which is our web application firewall, and AWS Shield and Shield Advanced, which are network and DDoS protection services. So first, there are 4 pillars that go into making up our perimeter protection approach. So integration, we're integrated directly into CloudFront Edge locations, which you heard previously, and our AWS regions across the globe. We're always on, so Shield Standard ensures that all of AWS is available, no matter the size of the attack, so AWS services are always available. Of course, it's affordable, just like the rest of AWS. You only pay for what you use at a competitive rate, and it's flexible. So you write your own rules and conditions with WAF, or you can create custom mitigations with our DDoS response team for Shield Advanced. So let's talk a little bit about our journey and how we got here and where we're going after that. So we've actually been protecting AWS and Amazon.com since the beginning of AWS. We then recently launched WAF, our web application firewall, for application layer protection in 2015. We then launched Shield Advanced for customers who need a little bit extra support when it comes to network layer and DDoS layer protections. And then finally, in 2017, we released Shield Advanced for EC2 instances and network load balancers. That's in particularly helpful for customers with certain types of traffic, like UDP-based game servers. So diving a bit deeper into WAF, first of all, it's on Amazon CloudFront and our application load balancers. Now, it protects you in a number of different ways and allows you to customize those protections to make sure that your application is always up. So, for example, we have things like virtual patching on content management systems like Drupal or WordPress. You can use IP reputation lists from industry groups or ones you provided yourself. We can also protect against SQL injection attacks, which are attacks driven towards your data-driven applications. And it can stop well-formed application layer DDoS attacks like HTTP floods. Again, bad and good bots can be mitigated or allowed depending on what your application needs. And all of this is based on proprietary machine learning algorithms, so it actually gets smarter over time. Now, there are about 3 different components to WAF and sort of pillars to how WAF can protect you. So first of all, it's a highly flexible rules engine. So you can create conditions that can roll into rules to inspect any part of a request, like the query string or the body of the request. And these mitigations can actually propagate in less than 1 minute and sometimes much faster to ensure that once you're under attack, you can stop that attack quickly. Moving up, we even have pre-configured protections that help you get started in a really simple way. So we've made some CloudFormation templates to help you launch things like a threat list against a threat protection against the OWASP Top 10, which is an industry list of top 10 most critical application security risks. Then we have security automations for anomaly-based protections. So you can use some of our machine learning services to parse through a complete set of WAF logs to detect anomalies and automatically update the web access control lists, or web ACLs, with a service like AWS Lambda. And then finally, we even have partner-managed rules that allow you to get started in a really simple manner, often 1 or 2 clicks. So you can go to the WAF Rules Marketplace and find these rules, which are created by leading WAF industry companies like Fortinet, Imperva, Trend Micro, AlertLogic, etc. And they have rules for things like the OWASP Top 10, bad bots, IP reputation lists, or content management system patching. So let's talk a little bit about Shield Standard versus Shield Advanced. So again, Shield Standard was created to ensure that no AWS service goes down and no service in general goes down. Shield Advanced, on the other hand, helps customers ensure that their particular applications within that service don't go down due to a DDoS attack. So the primary components of protection for Shield Advanced are our DDoS expertise, visibility and compliance, and economic protections and benefits that you'll have access to. So let's talk a little bit first about the DDoS expertise. So first, with detection, you can baseline traffic against resources so we know what's normal and what's not when it comes to your traffic. Then you can set granular thresholds so we can bring in some of the mitigations sooner than we would otherwise, depending on your application traffic sensitivity. Then, once we bring in those mitigations, we'll filter out only the worst packets so we ensure that you don't experience any false positives. We'll also engineer traffic across our network if needed so that your application can stay up and move that traffic around where necessary. Then with our DDoS response team, they can help you create custom mitigations based on your expected traffic patterns. They'll ensure your architecture is DDoS resilient. They'll get engaged if and when an attack occurs and tries to bring you down. They'll actually hop on the phone, or you can proactively engage them if you're under attack via a number of different vehicles, like Lambda buttons, or IoT buttons with a Lambda connected to it that can actually cut a ticket directly to the DDoS response team. So diving into the visibility and compliance side of things, we actually have 15 different CloudWatch metrics to allow you to monitor your application vulnerability, and those can actually be set to trigger alarms so that you can engage your security response team when you're under attack. You also have diagnostic reports to allow you to understand what happened after an attack and triage your fixes accordingly, and then allow you to report on those fixes, report on those attacks, and report on that for compliance purposes. Then there's the global threat reporting dashboard. You can even use this to check out what AWS sees and what we're detecting across our entire network, and then allow you to set up mitigations and to set up a better posture to ensure that you have a proper security posture in case of a particular launch that you might have. So diving into some of the economic benefits, AWS WAF actually comes at no additional cost with Shield Advanced. AWS Firewall Manager comes at no additional cost as well. Now, we haven't talked about this, but in general, Firewall Manager is a service that helps you manage WAF and your web access control lists across various accounts and across your entire organization for simple management from one centralized location. Then there's actually cost protections for scaling. So if you scale up your architecture due to a DDoS attack, we'll actually credit you back the cost of scaling. So that, in general, are some of our perimeter protection services and how you can stay safe with your content and stay safe with your application by using these services at the edge and inline.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to go back and take a look at the case studies and retouch on some of the examples that are provided through CloudFront, Shield, and WAF. The first that I'd like to point out is the dynamic content delivery from Supercell. And we have a little example about this on some of our case studies that are provided on the CloudFront webpage. But it goes into depth to show how Supercell is not only using CloudFront for the static content delivery, but also that dynamic content delivery. Another example of dynamic content delivery comes through secure API acceleration with Slack. On our case study and also our Getting Started webpage for CloudFront, there's a video that talks about how Slack uses CloudFront for that API acceleration. And they go into some great depth and provide some great insights from their engineering team who is presenting that session. And then lastly, the thing I'd like to draw attention to is that we have a wide number of individual developers and small businesses that use CMS sites for whether it's an individual blog or some type of small business. But here again, CloudFront can really help with the acceleration and protection of a CMS site, whether it is WordPress or Drupal. Now, in closing, we'd like to just re-review some of the key takeaways and benefits of Edge services. And I'll keep this pretty short and high level, that really the benefits that we really wanted to emphasize today was the increased performance and also the enhanced security that you can receive, again, when you put Edge services as that tight application boundary around your origin, that compute, that data store, and that storage element. Again, we wanted to say thank you for joining us in this webinar today. We have several landing pages for each of these services. We call out CloudFront here because it's a great place to get started. There's a lot of resources there to educate yourself a little bit more with more videos or white papers or blogs and little getting started projects as well. Again, thank you for joining us in today's webinar. We'll go ahead and look at the chat, and we'll go into some questions and answers here. Again, the way that we will go ahead and take care of questions and answers is through the questions box on the right. So you should be able to see on the right-hand side of the broadcast an area where you can enter in your question. Just for sake of ease, I think that's the way that we'll go ahead and manage any of the questions that come through. So you can either send it as a broadcast to everyone or just send it privately. One of the questions that did come through to me directly was, do you have to use an AWS origin with CloudFront? And the answer to that is no. Any HTTP server that is publicly accessible will work. CloudFront can go and fetch that content directly from that server, whether it's on-premise or maybe on some other hosting server as well. The idea here is that there are definitely some advantages to using an AWS origin like EC2 or S3. One of those primary benefits that comes with using an AWS origin is that it is free to send data from that AWS origin to that CloudFront Edge location whenever that content is requested. So you do have the economic benefit of not having to pay multiple times to transfer every gigabyte of data going from your origin to the viewer through CloudFront. Again, so you're not restricted to using an AWS origin, but again, we do think it is a best practice. Let's see. Someone asked if we can download this presentation. Yes, we will go ahead and provide this presentation on SlideShare on LinkedIn. What we'll go ahead and do is we'll pull down a list of all the participant emails, and we can go ahead and send a follow-up email that will link to that SlideShare when we get that uploaded. I think we'll also go ahead and see if we can get the recording of the presentation sent out as well as a link. I don't know about that, but again, we'll try and get that out so that if anyone missed the beginning part of this presentation, they'll be able to see the full thing. All right, another question that came in was, is there a way we can lock down access to our origin through CloudFront only? Yes, again, that is possible. If you're using a security group with EC2, you can create a security group that only is centered around CloudFront IP addresses, so that the only things that can go back and fetch content or communicate with your origin with EC2 is through CloudFront. You can do the same thing with origin access identity, is what it's called, with an S3 bucket. Again, allows users to only access S3 content by using the URLs directly through CloudFront and not being able to access the S3 links directly. And again, that is another feature that allows you to protect your origin. Let's see. Have any other questions come through?
Looks like there's a question here about who or which company ensures that the firewall servers are applied as a best practice. Um, what CloudFront and WAF offers the ability for you to go ahead and write your own WAF rules. There are also managed rules that are available um, in the AWS Marketplace. And so there's a lot of opportunities to go ahead and look at WAF rules that apply to the OWASP top 10 threats out there and to protect yourself from that and apply those as well. It's up to you to go ahead and write your own pen test to identify if that's being applied correctly or operating the way that you would like it to. So again, that is upon you to go ahead and operate that test however you want to kind of configure those rules and then, I guess, simulate that they're working as intended. And another question came in about partners with AWS and CloudFront specific. So there are a wide number of partners that are all certified to some degree or another that also specialize in different areas of AWS services. And so there are partners that are specifically geared towards content delivery. And what that means is that there are people that can help you get your CloudFront distributions configured just right. It can also help you go ahead and set up your WAF rules or get signed up for additional protection with like AWS Shield Advanced. Either way, what I'm saying here is that there are partners available even within your own country. If you can go to our partner site, what you'll be able to see is their contact information, and you can work with them and get a little bit more support or assistance on kind of whatever use case you have. So I would highly encourage all of our participants to also go look at our partner page. Right. Rob, do you have any questions coming directly to you that you'd like to answer directly?
Yeah, I got one question on Shield and how to get started. It's quite simple to get started. You actually just sign in via the console and then select which resources that you'd like to protect. So whether they be CloudFront distributions, elastic load balancers, application load balancers, or EIPs, just find those in the dropdown that you'll see under your account. And then those resources will now be protected. We'll start detecting traffic that comes in and baseline normal traffic and start blocking anomalous and DDoS-based traffic as well. So it's very easy to get started. And from there, there's not much that you need to do. You can connect with our DDoS response team and discuss
game day services and what you might do when you might be under an attack and how to engage the DDoS response team. But other than that, you'll start seeing the bad traffic, the very obviously detectable DDoS traffic, detected and mitigated from the start.
All right, I got another one that came through asking about regional edge caches and how that works. So I'm going to go back to, we have on our AWS or the CloudFront details page, you can go back and see that network map of CloudFront edge locations and regional edge caches, and that includes the 130 or more locations in total. So what we have are that first line of edge locations are the first link or the first point of contact that the users will have the DNS resolution go to. And it's almost like when you're looking in your cache, you first look in your front pockets and you're looking for your keys or whatever that content is, and you first check, okay, is that content in my front pockets? If it's not there, you're going to go look into the next most obvious location or that next location, which might be your backpack. And so you kind of go back and look in your backpack, see if that content is there. So that'd be kind of like that regional edge cache. It's more capacity, but it's still close by. And then if it's not in that regional edge cache, then again, you're going to go back to the origin and request that content. So that might be, okay, maybe I left it back in my house. So it's kind of like that analogy of you're looking in your most obvious or the closest locations first before you go back to that origin to fetch that content. So that regional edge cache is a mid-tier layer of caching, much greater cache width capacity than the edge location itself. But we also have a collection of geographically kind of similar edge locations speaking to the same regional edge cache. So for example, we've got a regional edge cache in Frankfurt. All of the edge locations in that general area would be all talking to the Frankfurt regional edge cache before going to your origin. Oh, and those regional edge caches are free. There's no additional charge for using that. That's just automatically ingrained into your CloudFront architecture. All right, the last thing I'll comment on before letting the session go is that, again, just wanting to reemphasize that we do have a lot of other great getting started resources. So if you go again to the CloudFront webpage, you'll see at the top of the webpage, there's a bar that says Getting Started. And from that Getting Started page, you can click on a 10-minute tutorial that just walks you through maybe a dozen steps or so, something that you can complete in 10 minutes about just a little quick and easy project of using an S3 origin and accelerating that content so you can, again, see how that works when you're accessing that content through CloudFront versus S3. And then on that same page, there's a lot of good videos that, again, provide case studies or deep dives into more technical topics from reInvent or other speaking sessions that have occurred in the past and were recorded, and again, are available on demand for whatever is of interest to you. So again, thank you for joining us in today's webinar. Again, take a look at our announcements as we continue to launch more edge locations around the world and continue to launch more features, and especially with reInvent coming up in November, stay tuned to some of the announcements coming around that time as well. So again, thank you all for joining today's presentation. We'll go ahead and dismiss the webinar. And if you have any questions, you can always follow up with us during office hours, which we'll be holding again next Thursday, not this Thursday, but next Thursday, September 27th. So thank you again.